Hi everyone, I'm going to show you how to replace the main distributor shaft on the 8270 distributors. This should apply to 8290 XLI and below distributors. This is going to cover removing the clutch, which I've already done. Very simple. You're going to unwind the spring, take the nut off and slide that all off, remove the drive shaft. We're going to remove this belt. We're going to have to undo the lacing after we take tension off of this tensioner. After that, it's going to be free to take out after we pull a bolt and a roll pin out, and it's going to come out this way. So let's get started. So to take the belt off, we need to remove tension from it. This here is the tensioning roller, and this is the spring. Now there's no good trick to this. You sort of just have to brute force it. We're going to take a flathead screwdriver. We'll probably end up needing one longer than this. And we're going to go in and try to pull it off of here. If you try pulling from the tensioner side, it gets really awkward. So we're going to do it from here. We're probably going to need a longer screwdriver. And we're going to go in like this and knock it off of that post. One thing to keep in mind is that there are notches. I don't have much light here. There are notches on this here where the spring goes that determine, they help you align the belt if the belt is walking too far to each side of the roller. So on this tensioner, there's more spring tension on this side, so it's shortening this side of the belt essentially. So we're going to remember what notch of this tensioner the spring is on and put it back there, since our belt is centered as it is. I'm going to get a long screwdriver and alright, that there was pretty easy with the help of this. I did end up having to use the really long one. One thing you should really make sure you have is safety glasses before you try messing with these springs, because sometimes there's a lot of tension. The next step is to pull apart the belt lacing. Usually it's just a pin, and sometimes it's bent to keep it from falling out on its own. This one's been in here for a while, so it's going to be a bit stiff. Just use some needle nose pliers and see if we can yank that loose. I need two hands for this. Okay, the belt is apart, and the pin seems to have gone apart in two pieces. One thing you want to keep in mind, we're going to remove the belt now. One thing to keep in mind is that the front side of this has more loops in the lacing than the back side, because the belt travels this way. If you had those sticking out, they'd get peeled off, but since they're pointing this way, they'll never be peeled off by anything jammed in the distributor. This belt should come out pretty easy. You can pretty much just pull it from anywhere. And at this point, if you're replacing the belt, the removal is done for that. Right now we're going to approach pulling or disconnecting the wheel from the main shaft of the distributor, which is what we were trying to get at. With the other side, there's a circlip here right behind this roll pin, which is going to get in our way, and then there's usually a roll pin here. It looks like it has fallen out. This distributor hasn't been properly serviced in a long time. And then lastly, there's a very small bolt right there that needs to be loosened, and after we do that, we should just be able to press this out without messing with the circlips, but if we encounter an issue, we're going to have to pull those out. Alright, so I've gotten this far. The nut down there used to be some kind of standard size, but unfortunately it's turned round, so I've got my vice grips on one side and I've got the proper size Allen key on the other. That's just the kind of thing you run into. Now you can see that this is loose within the shaft, and you should be able to start pushing this out. And look at that. In this case, we're lucky, and it just fell right out. So we're going to pull it through the other side and take it to the bench to look and see what the problem with it might be. I suspect that it is bent. Here's just another spare. I'll put it over there so I don't get confused. Close my box here and get it out of the way. Alright, so here is what I'm going to use. This is the shaft that I plan on using. It is also a spare. I think it was taken off of a lane when it needed, it had some issue we couldn't quite figure out, so we just decided to rebuild the entire distributor. And this, what I'm looking for is a light gap underneath between the bench and the, which would indicate that it is warped or bent somehow. So that one's good, I know. So here I've got the, I have that ring and the roll pin out of the old shaft just so we can look at it better. You want the desk to be clean and the shaft, so just give it a quick wipe down, that way there's no dirt skewing how you're seeing this. As you can see, there's a little light gap there. There's a bit right there. You see it's, you know, maybe a millimeter proud of the desk, but here it's flat. There's no gap there. On this side there's a big gap there, so it looks like this definitely needs to be replaced. Another way to do it is with a straight edge, run it across, and do it on the other side. You can see I've got it pressed firm down here. There's a big gap, so this shaft is worn. I suspect that is causing a large amount of our issues. There's a similar problem with this shaft. The only reason I'm keeping it is for scrap metal. So we're going to go ahead and install this ring onto this slot here in the shaft, and we're going to replace this roll pin. This roll pin is what the drive shaft of the distributor links up into and uses to push the shaft. I just found my spare box of hardware here. Here's the old ring and here's the new one. And it's not too crucial, this part, but this one's just a little loose, and it's old enough I feel like replacing it since I have so many. And these roll pins are in here, and they're the perfect size for this hole. So that will work fine. I also have a assortment kit of roll pins back here. This can also be found at Harbor Freight, and one of these sizes will also work perfect if you have trouble finding them. So to install this clip, which is what we're going to do first, we're going to need snap ring pliers. There we go. You see it's fully seated in that slot. Now for the roll pin. You can see I've got the roll pin started here. I ended up just bracing it on the anvil part of this vise and hammering it that way. That way it's putting pressure directly on this, and that worked fine. I'm going to get it all the way until it's flush, and then use the mallet the rest of the way just to make sure I don't bend this, because this is the only spare part that I have. Here I am at the vise again, just finished putting the roll pin in, and we should be ready to insert the shaft into the distributor. I'm going to set this right here for now, and we're going to take a look at the bearings before we get any further, just because we have this thing so far apart. And I'm going to go in here and make sure that they roll smoothly. This one's smooth. I feel a little grit, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. And I'm going to check the play in it, and this bearing on this side is still fine. Doesn't seem to have any problems. Over on this side, it's the same. I don't feel any grit in this one, and there's no play at all. The grit I feel in this is very, very minimal, and it'll probably take another year for that bearing to develop any play at the speed that this turns. You can take a bit of a closer look at the wheel. I just want to make sure that there's no cracks within it. Since it's right here exposed, it'd be better to see with a light, but You want to look for any cracks or obvious warping. I don't see anything to be concerned of, and we're just going to be able to reuse this here. Here I am at the distributor. I'm just going to put the shaft in through this side. And line this wheel up with it and push it the rest of the way in. Okay, here we are. Now this wheel can have all the play right now that it can have, because we don't have bolts put in. So now we're going to rotate until we see that that hole for the bolt is going to be kind of tricky to find in here. I'm just going to kind of spin it around and slowly pull it through until it is revealed. So you might just barely be able to make out daylight through this. This hole is the one that's supposed to have a roll pin. Ours did not have one. It's going to be the same size as the one we replaced on the far side here, where it's driven by the gearbox. So what you're going to need for that is a hammer and a punch, just like removing it, or removing the old one from the old shaft if you did that. So now I'm going to find another roll pin and press that in there. This one's a bit tricky just because you don't have much space to work down in there, but it should be easy enough. So I have that roll pin in. You might be able to see it's about even. It's not going to catch on anything. It's hanging out far on one side. It's just good practice to keep it even. What was helpful for me is this tool. I have two of these gauges. They're used at various spots around the machines. This one I use to press bearings in, since it's extra, because it's a flat metal surface and you can press bearings in. True. It's just a little less fiddly than trying to get a punch on that pin while you hammer it in. Next step, we're going to try to find a spare for this bolt setup here, because it just didn't work so well, and it was kind of a pain to get that Allen key and the vice grips on it, so we're going to find a spare. So I found this nut, a washer, and the right sized socket for it before I get up there. I can't find it. I unfortunately don't have a hex head bolt. So that's this pin. That must be why this was used. So just like before, just slide that in there and then tighten it up. So that bolt has been tightened down snug. It was a lot easier this time since I knew what size that nut would be. I'm going to go ahead and spin this, and it spins really freely. I went ahead and hooked the drive shaft back up just to make sure that everything's lined up right, because that'll tell you if you messed up somewhere. Now, next step is to get the belt back on the machine, but before we do that, since it's already off, I'm going to give it a quick inspection and make sure there's no tears or anything concerning. This belt seems pretty old, but still within usability. I'm going to look at the lacing. None of it seems loose. It does seem a little bent, but that should hold up fine. Since that pin came out in two pieces, I'm going to use a spare. That looks a little better. You see, this is just some steel wire with a little insulation on it. If that insulation is rubbed through by the I just forgot the word for it, but anyway, if it's rubbed through by that, the lacing, sorry, you'll want to replace it. So I went ahead and put the belt into the machine, making sure that the side with two extra laces is facing this way. One thing you want to make sure is that into this piece, because if you're not looking, this piece kind of disappears under here, this piece of aluminum that guards the belt. It kind of disappears, and then you'll turn the lane on wondering what the scratching noise is. So make sure it's fed through that, down here, all around, and what we're going to do is just slide this pin in, and then give it a little bend on this side, just so it doesn't fall out. I went ahead and installed that pin. I gave it a little bend just so it has no possibility of walking its way out of there. And the bend is facing this way, that way as it rolls down the belt, it can't get caught on it. Now, we need to tension this belt onto the distributor. Here's the spring. I'm going to install it in the same slot that it came out of. It's a little tricky to get in there just because it's so tight. That should do it. Now we need to get this notch, or this hook, all the way onto that notch. It's no easy task. So make sure you have your safety glasses on. It's probably going to take you about 10 times before you actually get it on there. It's quite difficult. What I have found easiest to do is to go in, stretch this spring out as much as you can, and then go in from here and then guide it either from under or beside and try to hook it onto that post down there. Alright, I got it in the right slot, and check it out. I finally got it hooked on the post. We are almost done here. Our final step is to reassemble the clutch. But before I do that, I'm going to make sure everything's alright by turning this machine on, just watching the belt move. It should be able to run without the clutch, and we'll know pretty quick if anything's wrong. Alright, so just use the back end switch and turn it on. Check it out. That belt seems to be a little off center, so I probably could put that spring over another notch, but that's a job for another day. Over here, it's perfectly fine on this roller, so I'm not going to worry about it. And now, we're going to watch the shaft move and see if it goes up and down at all. That seems pretty rock steady. That should fix our issue. Now, before you put the clutch on, make sure you're at home position. You're going to look for the nub on that cam wheel. You see it right at the tip there in the center of the frame. We'll be good to go. We're going to go ahead and turn the machine on. As you can see, I have the clutch reinstalled. I've got it set at its standard adjustment starting point, which is 1 counterclockwise turn on that spring. The issue I was having with this distributor is that it seems to be a dirty clutch all the time. I'd clean the clutch and reassemble it. It would work fine for a few hours and then go out. I think that what would happen is that I noticed that this cam wheel would turn just a degree left and right as this went around. I looked and that shaft was out of circle, and it was constantly grinding on that stop plate. You can see this has a little motion in it, just a little back and forth wobble, which is about normal given the tolerances that these machines are working with. But I think that constant motion and torque on this and the stop plate would spin this clutch out of adjustment. I'm not seeing that action anymore. What I'm going to do is run this machine through its pins in order and see if the jaws feel like they have a consistent tension on them. If they're very consistent, I'm having an issue there. Take note of that. Another issue this distributor was having is that the jaws would go down and stick. You see, I'm still having that. So that needs to be investigated some other way. I believe it's an issue with the stop plate on the clutch. But it's one step at a time with these distributors. I'm going to take a look and show you what's going on here. See, it unsticks itself, but that's enough hang-ups, enough time caught up to cause a pile-up easily. But the tension on the jaws is consistent, which was the problem I was having, is sometimes they'd be tight, sometimes they'd be loose. Well, that was how to change the distributor shaft on an 8270 and 8290 distributors for AMF machines. Hope it was concise and easy enough to follow. I'll see you for the next one.